It's recording this. Hello, Natasha. How are you?
Hey, Paul, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm enjoying this beautiful weather we're getting at the moment.
Nice. Well, have you been taking cabs or taxis or Ubers lately?
Taxis, taxis. The ones from the taxi rank. It's it's quite an interesting topic when you've got the variability in the terminology, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. What do people mean by that word exactly?
Yeah. So I find that there's often a lot of ambiguity in the way people communicate. And that's why I thought we'd have a chat about it because it affects everything we do. In pharmaceuticals, if you're making an assumption, then often you'll end up doing the wrong work. If you're auditing and somebody blurts out a lot of stuff when what they thought you meant, when actually you were leading them in with an open question, then you can actually often find out things that they're doing wrong when you didn't really ask about it in the first place. They just had it on their mind because they know they've got an issue, and then you get extra observations to do for them. And then
Well,
there's acronyms.
oh, yeah. So I love ambiguity.
Yeah.
And sometimes I speak with a lot of ambiguity, but I'll tell you why. The core of our work revolves around how people conceptualize and what they do as a result of ambiguity. And so, from an unknowable and poorly described space, you can get how they conceptualize the world, their worldview, how they prefer to lead or to be led, how they prefer to learn or to teach, and how they will organize as a social unit.
Mm.
So, and ambiguity, I love ambiguity because it's so core to the way we research developmental approaches in leaders and organizations.
I don't know the research well enough to
But I
even
mean,
talk about it.
that's what you're talking about is in this ambiguous space when work needs to be done
Yeah.
and it's defined when you're not using the right languaging or the right processes or the right way of asking for what you need, then
Yeah.
it's subject to interpretation. So that's a how do you make sense of what's coming out of your mouth and make sense of what's in others' minds as they interpret what's coming out of your mouth or out of your SOPs or whatever.
Yeah. So when I was young, we used to use ambiguity on purpose and
Mm-hmm.
say the thing that we knew the other person didn't mean. So it's like the background. Call me a cab. Okay, you're a cab. She gets the taxi and he doesn't get the cab.
Or
um,
they could share it.
yeah, they could. But in a management from a management perspective, ambiguity is a nightmare. Because if you're attempting to get to the end of a task, if you're managing a project, and I find the team members when you leave them with some ambiguity, rather than making a decision and moving it forward, they just procrastinate or they wait and they say, "Well, I don't know what it means, so I'm not going to do it." And then you meet at the next meeting. Maybe it's a week later, maybe it's a month later, and they've done nothing. Rather than come back to you and say, "Did you mean this?" They freeze. And
Yeah, I'm with you because what happens is, say, a leader or manager says, "All right, ask me questions if you've got questions," and they leave, right? Well, people don't know enough about the situation to know what questions to
yeah,
ask. Or if they're more submissive to authority, they will never ask that authority because asking the question is somehow lowering them in the eyes of their leader.
that happens a lot in training.
Mm.
It's when I'm delivering, for example, the responsible person course, and they say, "Has anybody got any questions?" And you've come to the end of a session, and they think, "Oh well, what he was telling me about was relevant, and I understood it all." But then they come back, maybe a session later, or after lunch, or if it's in the evening, they come back in the morning on the next day's session, and they come back with a question because they've had a chance to think, to interpret, and to apply it to their context. Because
Well,
that's the
yeah.
problem. You're out of context, isn't it?
Well, out of context, and also what you've just done was explain that people need that bit of application to put it into practice. And it's one of the reasons why I changed a lot of our workshop formats and training, because I'm doing it in smaller pieces to allow people to implement and do their reports and do the pieces they need so they can have that visceral experience, so they can actually start asking questions that matter.
The bit that when I attend a course myself and somebody says, "Oh, have you got any questions?" And you think, well, how am I supposed to come with questions before I've started the course? Because you've got no content to be context. You haven't done the learning to be able to realize that this part of it isn't that clear. It's like the upstream downstream concept with whether it's joint ventures or whether it's customer supplier relationships.
Yeah.
The upstream versus downstream, it's a simple idea, but until you actually apply it, it's hard to use.
Yeah.
As soon as you start applying it, it's really easy.
Yeah. Well, once you've had some experience.
Yeah, when you're using it.
Yeah, totally. So there's the question, which is, what question do I ask? Because I don't know enough to ask a good question, so I'm not going to suck up time. Then there's the question of, how do I do this, which doesn't relate to the rest of the group. Yeah. And then there's the question that does relate, that's a good question. So, I actually do appreciate it when people ask questions that relate to a larger group, something that they might be thinking of. Because as a facilitator and as a consultant, you have this as well. You're so experienced in what you're doing, you're not quite sure where the gaps are for them.
Yeah, I know when I first started training, I didn't really think about the before and after. Where do I want them to take them from, and where do I want to take them to? I just used to deliver the content.
And the content is ambiguous until it is applied and they have experience.
Yeah. So my first
of people can handle ambiguity.
Yeah. My first training I delivered as part of my degree. So it was part of my applied biology degree. And I was talking about a topic that didn't relate to any of the audience. And 10 minutes into it, I realized nobody understood a thing I was saying. And I'd pitched it at the level that was the academic ready to present back at the university, but they were giving me a practice go on site. So I was on site at a manufacturing site, pharmaceutical, medical products and medical devices, talking about ecology, the way plants grow. They didn't have a clue. So halfway into the presentation, what I ended up doing was getting a flip chart and dumbing it down. Right. And actually, as a result, I ended up changing the presentation.
Well, popularizing it, taking out the jargon. Yeah.
Well, yeah, popularizing it. I call it dumbing it down, because using complex terminology that people don't understand confuses.
Yeah.
Adds the ambiguity.
Yeah, there's the ambiguity of uncertainty in that space because you haven't done anything. And then there's the ambiguity of instruction and what's expected. And
Yeah.
those are different kinds of ambiguities.
Let's
But
talk about them on the next one.
yes.
Okay, Natasha, I think this conversation could last about a week.
I take a week to do this.
Yeah. Okay, so it's Paul Palmer and
Natasha Todorovic Cowan signing out. Have a good one.
Bye bye.